start it.
Coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Pod.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I am your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another fun and exciting episode for you guys today. Week 11 is almost over. Fortunately, Monday Night Football is kind of going to be a snooze fest. Besides for Coach Tyler, I'm sure he's going to love Monday Night Football. But the week's almost over, and we're heading into Week 12. Of course, Coach Tyler's on the show today. What's going on, Coach Tyler?
What's up, guys? Yeah, battle for Texas tonight. If the Texans don't win by 40, it's a loss. So hopefully it's a turn the game off at halftime for most of y'all.
Hopefully. I mean, as long as Nico Collins scores a bunch of points for me in fantasy, I'm okay. So like I said, Week 11 is almost over. We are almost on to Week 12 now. I didn't put my background right, but that's okay. We're almost on to Week 12 now. We've 3 weeks left of the regular season, guys. I can't believe fantasy football, for a lot of people, almost over. Some people, it may be already over for them. But if it's not over for you yet, there's still time. And it starts this week with making the right waiver moves. Unfortunately, waivers, not that great this week. Just what it is. But we're going to give you guys a quick episode on waivers. And then next week, you're definitely going to want to tune in because we're going to make a show a little bit bigger. We're going to be talking about trades, fantasy playoffs. We're going to be doing a lot of things to help you out in that final stretch because a lot of fantasy leagues and their waivers usually end next week. So we're going to give you guys a nice big show next week, hopefully, for it. But tell me if your waivers, your trade deadlines end earlier. So maybe even next year we'll have to do 2 shows or something like that. But we're going to get right into the action here, guys. So injuries from Week 11. Thankfully, there's nothing too insane. Darnell Mooney, hamstring, Allen Robinson, concussion, Alexander Madison, ankle injury, Zamir White, quad, Tajay Spears, concussion. Nothing that's too crazy to kind of go over and to mention, but those were some of the injuries there this past week. Again, none of those, some of those players are, some impactful. I mean, Mooney said he's supposedly fine. I think Alexander Madison's fine. Zamir White, if he has a concussion, there's a good chance he misses Week 12. But again, nothing earth-shattering, which is unfortunate because, well, not unfortunate for the players, but unfortunate for us as fantasy managers being able to find players out on waivers to really go after this week because this is a big week, guys. This is a mega bye week. Falcons, Bills, Bengals, those are just key matchups right there. Jaguars, Saints, Jets. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy players that are going to be out of our lineups going into Week 12. So you're going to really have to focus down and find players that can help you win. And it's going to start right here this week with our waiver wire segment. So let's start with quarterbacks. Right at the top here. Coach Tyler, I'm going to let you go first since I just talked for a whole bunch just now. But give us your top waiver wire quarterback for the upcoming week.
Yeah, I'm going to have to stick with Drake May. He's a guy that we've talked about a lot, and he's still under 40% in a lot of leagues. He's been falling into the range of about a quarterback 2 finish really the last couple weeks in your standard 4-point passing touchdowns. Last 3 weeks have been quarterback 18, 16, and 13 finishes. And especially of the matchups that I see here, I would really want to play the Miami matchup as opposed to Pittsburgh or Houston. But yeah, May has really made really a lot out of a little in New England. Like he came in and his weapons aren't anything to really write home about. They're not a very highly ranked offense, and they weren't projected to be a very highly ranked offense going into the year. But for fantasy purposes, May is getting a lot done for you. He's teetering around a floor of about 200 pass yards and a passing touchdown. But what I really want to point out is since week 6, when he took over the starting job, he has been a surprising rusher for you. So if you have him starting in week 6, 38 rushing yards, 18, 46 and a touchdown, 95, 24, and 27. So you're getting, you know, a little sneaky rushing upside from Drake May, along with a, you know, around floor of 200 passing yards and a touchdown. And if I am looking for a guy on the waivers this week to fill in, maybe you only have one quarterback and it's one of the ones on bye, maybe your quarterback's been kind of up and down, questionable, then May might be a guy for you just because of the floor that he has.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the rookie has a ton of potential this week, especially with a lot of quarterbacks out on bye. Starting off with some higher end ones before I get into my quarterbacks. And again, we do always under 40%, but there may be some guys out there that are over the 40% that you should really consider probably over the under 40% right this week. Like Bo Nix still might be out there. Bo Nix is playing fantastic football. Anthony Richardson did come back and play very well against the Jets, but he does play Detroit this week. But if anything like what we've seen with Bryce Young and his like kind of rejuvenated part of his career playing better football, not great, but better football, maybe Anthony Richardson can do the same. Justin Herbert has been lights out in fantasy. Tua has come off of his first solid game of the season. So if you're looking for quarterback, I would shoot for those guys first. But if not, like I said, like Coach Tyler said, Drake May is a fantastic option. I also like Will Levis. I know Coach Tyler will probably say something different about that Houston defense, but it has kind of been up and down at times in secondary. And Will Levis, since coming back from injury, has put up respectable fantasy numbers here. And I expect this team to continue to be behind, which allow Will Levis to see the ball thrown more in his way. And again, Will Levis has one of the best fantasy schedules left of the regular season and the season. So we've seen it time and time again. A garbage time quarterback comes in and plays well for us in fantasy and ends up having a 25-point game each and every single week in the fantasy playoffs. And they're not a good, talented quarterback, aka Blake Bortles. We've seen it year after year, and Will Levis could be that guy. So if you're looking to pick up someone up now and then see what he's able to do over the next 6 weeks, he might end up helping you win a lot. Again, we'll have to see how that talent really plays out, but him, Drake May, Jameis Winston, I think also is in consideration. I know he's got Pittsburgh this week, but never want to count out Jameis Winston over anything. He always finds ways to throw fantasy production up in the air for us. So Jameis Winston's another quarterback you can go out there and consider. In Dynasty, if you haven't heard already, Daniel Jones has been benched in favor for Tommy Cutlets, Tommy DeVito. I will be seeing him live on Sunday. He's going to be a starting quarterback for the New York Giants. Drew Lock will be the backup. Daniel Jones is basically, at this point for me, done in New York. So there's going to be a change at quarterback here. So let's stick with that before we head over to these wide receivers. You know, let's talk about Tommy DeVito here, Coach Tyler. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason for more concern with Malik Neighbors now?
I don't feel like there would be a reason for more concern. Obviously, DeVito he had a couple really hot games when he ended up playing last year. But, you know, Malik Neighbors was really making the bulk of his fantasy production by just really being force-fed targets. And I think that, especially with a guy like Tommy DeVito, if I walk out on that field and I'm Tommy DeVito and I'm looking at my weapons around me, I'm going to try and get the ball into the hands of the best player that I have available, and that's going to be Malik Neighbors. So I think that nothing goes down in terms of his production target-wise or possibly reception-wise. The yardage downfield would be where I would take that hit on Neighbors. That's where I would think that he begins to fall down, you know, that average depth of target, the yards per target. But I think in your PPR leagues, he's made a ton of money in being like a double-digit target guy, right? We have 2 weeks this season that he's been healthy that he hasn't had double-digit targets. And I don't think that that's set to change at all. And so I think, you know, his yards per target has been around, you know, 5-6 yards per target. I think that doesn't really change all that much. I think they try and keep him close and keep him open for DeVito. But I think outside of the yardage, if I have him in PPR, I'm not overly concerned with his production drop off from a Daniel Jones to a Tommy DeVito.
No, I mean, that's fair to say there. I mean, kind of looking back at what DeVito did last year with some of his weapons, even though his weapons were not that great last year. He played, started about 5 or 6 games here. I mean, you had Jalen Hyatt have a 100-yard game at 1 week. You had Wandale Robinson finish with 13 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And then in 17 in 2 different games, Darius Slayton had a 18-point fantasy day on 4 for 80 and a touchdown. So there still should be enough to keep him going here. Again, I don't think the talent level from DeVito to from Jones is all that different. It could just be the style. It could actually mean more passing, because I don't think DeVito is a true athlete like Daniel Jones in terms of his ability to be able to run the ball. So you might see some more rushing. If anything, this definitely gives Tyrone Tracy a bump probably in rushing yards. So if you're looking for, if you have Tyrone Tracy on your team, you should be thrilled. At least I'm probably going to run the ball a little bit more, but hopefully this means that DeVito is going to be able to throw the ball a little bit more, or will probably throw the ball a little bit more. And hopefully Neighbors can benefit from that and just a high target volume to give him enough fantasy production moving forward. And it's not great, but it's not probably going to kill Neighbors and what he already was giving us over the last month anyway for fantasy. So, but it's definitely not going to help Neighbors be like a top 10 fantasy wide receiver, I think, again, for this season here. But top 20 still, hopefully that is still going to be in his cards moving forward. All right, over to the running backs here. Let's see here. Let's just quickly start with the higher tier players. Like, you're looking at Tank Bigsby. Maybe Jonathan Brooks got dropped after some frustrating owners couldn't handle him not playing through the first 10 games. Tajay Spears, even with the concussion. Maybe Jalen Warren's still out there. So some of those guys, those higher end guys, if you're looking for players, you might want to go that direction. Maybe Jerome Ford, who hadn't played the most snaps last week for the Browns. But Coach Tyler, give us your top waiver wire pickup for running back this week.
Yeah, obviously, if you have the ability to go out and get a Tank Bigsby off your waivers, please go do it. But one guy that we talked about him last week, obviously he went into a bye this week, which is where we told you to grab him because he wouldn't be high on your waiver wires, is Trey Benson. We've seen an increase in usage for him over the last few weeks. It's been, he went from 0 carries and 0 targets to 1 carry and 0 targets to 8 carries and 1 target to 10 carries and 2 targets. So we're just slowly stepping up over the past month. And coming off the bye week, obviously the Cardinals have time to sit down and really analyze what their team is going to look like going forward. They're in a position that really, I'm sure not a lot of people outside of the organization thought that they would be in to contend for the playoffs this year. They have a great running back in James Conner, who's been really good for you in fantasy. But Trey Benson, if not for the fact that he would just be a James Conner handcuff if you're a James Conner owner, because you know how his injuries like to pop up, Benson was a guy that was drafted fairly high. He was the running back 2 of this class, and the Cardinals put a lot of belief into him. And he's a big guy, 6'1", 223, 225-ish. And now he's starting to see an uptick in his usage. And as we've seen the last 2 weeks that he played before the bye week, that has resulted in 2 RB2 weeks, right? RB22 and RB24 finish in a full PPR league. And so I really believe that he could be a guy that comes out of the bye week and begins to, keep those touch numbers up, begins to keep running the ball and getting his play, I don't want to say up to game speed because we're 12 weeks into the season now, but really kind of getting up to game speed of where the Cardinals want him to be and the usage that they want him to have.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That's why he's my top player this week here. And unfortunately, there's just not a running back to go out there and say, oh, I have a must start running back. Boom. Benson is more, you're hoping that the Cardinals had decided during that bye week, like, hey, we got to get this rookie more involved here. The reason we've been winning these high scoring games these last few weeks is because our run game has been so efficient and we've been so dangerous with the run game. And it starts with using Trey Benson more with James Conner to keep both fresh on the field here. So you're hoping that Benson is going to see potential flex weekly value moving forward here. And if not, you're hoping at some point a James Conner injury. And we already see what Trey Benson is able to do on the field. And it looks really good. Imagine a bigger workload for him in fantasy. So fantasy playoffs are coming up. He may be a guy to stash and see, Maybe he gets more involved. Maybe James Conner gets banged up. We know his injury history. And then Trey Benson has potential, high-end RB2 upside moving forward in fantasy. So, yeah, there's a reason why he's a top pick. But again, I understand that people might not want to go out there and get a guy who could end up having 3 carries this coming week here, just because it is what it is. But hopefully, after the bye week, a rookie usually ends up seeing some more production. You can look at Cam Akers too. Cam Akers might give you a little bit more flex appeal this week in fantasy, just because we've seen the last 2 weeks him having 10 carries in both games here. Obviously, it looks like the Vikings might want to keep Aaron Jones fresher for the not for the fantasy players, for their own playoff run, and maybe use Cam Akers a little bit more in this offense here. And you might see that over the next few weeks here, where Cam Akers is kind of splitting workload, allowing Aaron Jones to stay fresher and not risk injury with high workloads. And Cam Akers has been doing that the last few weeks. Now very inefficient at times, but he did score a touchdown last week. Jalen Wright for the Dolphins. He played more snaps once again than Raheem Mostert here. Raheem Mostert's kind of being faded out of the Dolphins offense. And Jalen Wright has that home run upside in him on the ground here. Could be something that we see a little more as the season goes on. Amir Abdullah, pass catching running back, third down specialist. If, Alexander Madison or Zamir White's injury is more concerning for week 12, Amir might have himself a starting role, or at least a higher chance in this coming week here to play higher snaps. And then Roschon Johnson, I said that we might see a more efficient run game under the new OC in Chicago last week, and that was true. Roschon Johnson got a lot of work in, especially on the ground. He got to over 10 carries. So you might see these two seeing more runs in the backfield here, and Roschon might have opportunities to score touchdowns. I think he's the bigger back between him and DeAndre Swift, so you might see some more goal line work out of him. And then other options, just pick up some high-end backup. Pick up your backups. Pick up some of your your teams that are in first, second place and their backups. Pick their backups. Hurt their team out. Play defense a little bit. Again, there's not a lot of players that go out there and get that you can start day one, but there are some options out there. And then for those dynasty managers, again, Amir Abdullah, Ty Johnson, some pass catching specialists in PPR leagues might be at some value to you. But again, running back wise, it's really not a great week for running backs, and it hasn't been, unfortunately, in the last month. So, all right. One too many. Wide receiver time here now, Coach Tyler. Hold on, let me just go through the higher percentage guys here first. If guys like Quentin Johnson, Christian Watson, Rondale Moore, Ricky Pierce, or Xavier Legette are out there. They're over the 40% mark, but they all somehow have value for us in fantasy football that it might be worth going out there to get this week, and putting on your roster as potential bye-week replacements for flex options. So, but for those under 40% right now, Coach Tyler, where do we stand as your number one wide receiver to go out there and get?
Give me Alec Pierce. We got Anthony Richardson back, and that means that Alec Pierce has the potential to actually be something in fantasy again. Like we talked about with Alec Pierce at the beginning of the season, he's not going to get an overload of targets from really any quarterback, right? He's the deep threat, big bomb option. But there's very few quarterbacks outside of like a Jameis Winston in the league who likes to take a shot at a 70-yard touchdown instead of a check down than Anthony Richardson. Like, it's just a match made in heaven for both of them. And even this week, up against a tough Jets secondary and defense, we see 3 receptions for 74 yards. Like, if anything, you're getting double-digit fantasy points out of him because he's going to end up hauling in one of these long balls. And at the best, you get maybe a replication of a couple weeks that he's had this season where he's got 3 receptions for 125 yards or 134 yards, and one of those is going for a long touchdown. Like, he's a big boom bust guy. But if you're looking for wide receivers at this point under that 40% mark, he might be your best bet to actually go win you a week, because it's not going to be consistent, but it's sure going to be a fun ride if he actually hits for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pierce is a definitely good flex option if you're looking for a flex player for this week. It was a lot of it, like I said, a lot of bye weeks this week. He definitely has that upside for sure. I like Elijah Moore a lot too. More like season long, rest of the season kind of play there. I mean, he's been very productive for this Browns team ever since Jameis Winston took over, second in targets. Had a really strong week this week here. Had his first touchdown of the season, to be honest. So I think there's still more potential upside for this Browns receiver core where there's going to be some fluctuation in terms of who does the best. And I think Elijah Moore has kind of put himself in that potential flex appeal territory in a matchup. Maybe not this week per se, but for the rest of the season, there's going to be matches where they're going to be behind in games that are going to require Elijah Moore to see more work in fantasy football. So I like him a lot. DeMar Douglas is continuing to be a safe option. He's someone that, again, he's not going to put up big numbers each and every single week, but he should be able to put up a decent 10 to 12 fantasy points in most weeks for you, especially in PPR leagues. And then you're looking at other options. Rashad Bateman has been pretty productive since Deontay Johnson's been been traded over. MVS, he's on bye, but he's been putting up big numbers the last 2 weeks as he gets more involved in this offense here. Jalen Coker coming off a bye, seeing if they get that rookie more involved. Same with Jalen McMillan and Mike Evans potentially being back this week here. It might be more beneficial for McMillan to be more of the second option instead of being the first option on the field. Ray McLeod, he's going into a bye, but again, he's another option to kind of hold on to in fantasy. And then in Dynasty, MVS, if he's still out there, I still want to hold MVS right now in fantasy. It's just he's worth picking up and seeing if he continues to be that deep threat as the team comes back from their bye in week 13. So another option there for you in fantasy. Again, not a great week, unfortunately. I didn't really like the wide receivers, as I was saying. I'm like, I really don't want to pick these guys up per se. And again, for me, the most part of this week, guys, I don't know how you feel about that, Coach Tyler, but like for me, it's like the players I'm naming, I don't really want to go out there and get them, but if you need to, those are the best options. That's how I feel about a waiver wire this week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. For tight ends, final slide here for the night. Higher guys, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, guys like that should be worth picking up right now in fantasy. And then that's really about it in terms of the higher tier guys. We'll go over the tight ends here. Coach Tyler, who's your number one tight end?
Yeah, I really like both of these options. But a guy that we've talked about is Jonnu Smith. We talked, I want to say it was last week's waiver wire show. It may have been the week before, but we talked about Jonnu Smith. He was still on this under 40% list. And I talked about how I was scared to pick him up or really hold on to him with Tua coming back, because he had a good amount of targets on the weeks that Tua was out, but I didn't know what his target share was going to look like coming back. And with Tua back, he stayed consistent with the targets. And, if you listened and picked him up and put him in your lineup this week, you got 6 receptions for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. So you're really happy about that. But he's consistently getting the targets, and that's what we want to chase, right? Obviously, there's very few tight ends out there that are going to have consistent touchdown volume. That's just the way that the tight end spectrum has been this year. There's not a ton of guys that are just falling into the end zone every game like we've seen in the past, right? The Travis Kelce's of the world are not falling into the end zone like they have.
No.
And so we really want to chase targets, and targets from a high-value quarterback like Tua are targets that I would want to have my tight end getting. And we've seen, over since the bye week, we've seen 7, 6, 6, 4, and 8 targets. So he's getting the snap, he's getting the runs, and he's getting the ball at least thrown to him. Some of these he's not hauling in for whatever reason. But we've seen the targets, and it finally came to fruition this week. And there's some matchups going through the rest of the season that Jonnu could really exploit and could really be the guy to come out of as these secondaries focus more on, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who they rightfully should focus on in the explosive run game that Devon Achane brings. So there's a lot for defenses to handle. And I think that Jonnu Smith could be the guy to make it out of the wreckage and be the one to actually be getting these valuable targets and touches. So I really like Jonnu. I do like Disley. We saw a little bit of that blow up from him last night. Herbert's obviously loved him, but if I got to pick one, I'm going Jonnu.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And again, don't go over the top nuts. Half his yardage did come on a 56-yard touchdown. Now he was basically wide open, uncovered. Raiders defense didn't even cover him on this route, and he was just wide open. So take that into some consideration. But he also saw 7 targets before that long touchdown anyway. So he's seeing the volume in the offense more than Jalen Waddle, and that is another reason why you should pick him up. Opportunity knocks when it comes to tight ends. Same with Will Disley. Really solid week. He has a really good rest of the season schedule for tight ends. So if you're still looking for tight ends or frustrated with your tight ends options, Will Disley might end up having a really strong stretch at the end of the year for you to be able to do very well in fantasy. Other options, Theo Johnson, Tre'Davious Sanders, both tight ends coming off, rookie tight ends coming off bye weeks to see how they get more involved. Noah Gray, 2 touchdowns. I'm not taking it too seriously, but he has involvement from time to time. The biggest one, I don't know how you feel, but Taysom Hill. Obviously a monster game from him this past week here, Coach Tyler. Obviously 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, another touchdown in the air. Is he someone you're going after? I mean, I think we've seen this story before though, but is he someone that you're willing to hold and pick up through the bye weeks?
He is a guy that I picked up through the bye weeks a couple weeks ago. Okay. And I have George Kittle on my roster, and I woke up Sunday morning and Shefty told me that there was a very low chance that George Kittle was playing. So I put Taysom Hill in my roster, and I couldn't be happier. But, Taysom Hill just plays so many roles for the Saints. It's obviously not going to be like this every week. But we've seen as Jamal Williams and Kendrade Miller have been hurt, he's getting snaps out of the backfield, and he's taking rushes, in place of a backup running back when Kamara needs to take a breather. He's lining up in the slot. He's lining up out wide. He's lining up at tight end. He's going in at quarterback. We saw him throw the ball twice this past week, and, sometimes it's just kind of their wildcat formation of just sticking him back there. But he is such a Swiss Army knife that you are almost never going to consistently get one form of production out of him, which can be a good thing. Like this past week where we saw a completion, we saw 7 rushes for 3 touchdowns, and we saw 8 receptions on 10 targets. And then there's other weeks where that's going to culminate into 2 receptions and 4 rushes and no pass attempts, and he's just going to kind of be a gadget guy. So he's a guy that I really like. I was talking with some people about it on Sunday whenever I started him, because I started him in a league. It was between him and Mark Andrews for my George Kittle replacement. And I said I'd rather take the boom bust pick with Taysom Hill than be frustrated with Mark Andrews. And Fair. I'm very glad that I thought that way. But if you grab him, you got to go into it knowing, like, I can't expect him to be a tight end 1 every week. I can't expect him to even necessarily be the most viable tight end every week. But if I'm, taking a shot, if I've got a top tight end on bye and there's no one really on the waivers to get, but Taysom Hill's sitting there, I can grab him. I know that I'm either going to get 2 points or 25 points out of him. And you got to take the risk associated. But if you're starting him, you probably are someone that needs to take the risk associated with it. So I am all for picking him up, especially after this past week, just the usage that he's getting in that offense and how much it had to funnel through him. But pick him up with, kind of take it with a grain of salt and know if I'm putting him in my lineup, there's a chance he legitimately gets me 0 points. But at the same time, he can have a blow-up week like he did. Yeah,
no, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think if you have the roster spot, absolutely go after him. Do you start him, coming back? You could. Like I said, Coach Tyler said 25 or 2. You're probably starting him if you're desperate the last few weeks, and if you're thinking, hey, like, I'm going to need those last 2 weeks, 13 and 14, and I need a boom plays, then you should be making Taysom Hill a priority because he has that ability in him, and we saw it. I mean, he had career high in rushing. He has his 3rd career high in receiving yards. So he's been playing for like over 10 years in the league, just so you know. So like with Taysom Hill, it's like you're hoping for the best. That's all it is. Is he going to do that ever again this season? Maybe, but likely not. But his involvement will dictate on how healthy he is. And again, perfect time for a bye for him. Maybe he comes out of that bye even healthier than he's been all season here. He's been hurt most of the year. Hence why we haven't really heard about Taysom Hill most of the season. So Taysom Hill might be able to help you win a championship. But again, proceed with caution and hope for the best. If you don't have even if you have an elite tight end, you hold him on your bench and let someone else deal with that and let someone else have to play a shitty tight end the rest of the season, and you can hold Taysom Hill on your bench and let him go off for 25 even every week, even though you have Trey McBride or, you know, Kelsey or Andrews, or I mean, not Andrews as much, but Kelsey or Kittle, you know, like let those guys rock on your lineup and let Taysom Hill sit on your bench. So definitely worth picking up. I didn't put him on my top list, mostly because I kind of forgot, but not that I forgot. I kind of want to talk about him separately because of this situation here. Because if you're looking for tight ends this week, he's not the tight end you want to have starting because he's on a bye week. So, but Taysom Hill is definitely a consideration if you're looking for tight end, and if you're looking for that boom the last few weeks of the season and into the playoffs, he's worth a pickup, and he's an immediate pickup right now for fantasy.
I will say he has a great schedule rest of the season coming out of the bye. He goes Rams, Giants, Washington, Green Bay, Vegas.
Yes, very favorable schedule, so it's worth picking him up. So in that sense, but not if you need him for week 13 or 12. So that's for sure. But that is going to wrap us up for the week, guys. We hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode. As always, we enjoy doing this. You know, we do this for free. We don't make money off this. So, Coach Tyler, anything you want to say before I close this up?
Yeah, you know, go check out Dynasty Nerds. We plug it every show, and that's because it's worth plugging every show. Coach Steve does a lot in season over there. I do a lot more towards the draft side with the Devies. But go check out dynastynerds.com. Use code COACH when you get over there. Get access to the Dynasty GM, get access to the Dynasty Film Room, and check out all the articles we have. Lots of stuff getting you ready for your playoffs, lots of stuff getting you ready for the last couple weeks of your seasons, and then immediately stuff starting up for your Dynasty leagues and your Devy teams getting ready for April. And so y'all go check out dynastynerds.com, and thank y'all for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And we appreciate you for tuning in to the Fantasy Coaches as always. I'm trying to get back on a little bit of schedule here. I know I've been a little off and on all season long, especially on the Thursday shows. But every Monday we seem to be able to find a way to get it down packed. But we will be back on Thursday this week. I promise you that there will be a Thursday show this coming week here. We will break down every team. I did it this Saturday. A lot of fun to do it. Hopefully me and Coach Tyler can get on the same page, because talking for 40 minutes was not a lot of fun. But we thank you guys for tuning in. As always, if you're on our YouTube channel, please subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. We love doing this. We do this for free. We just love giving out great fantasy advice as much as we possibly can. If you're listening on our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you know, please like and review. We always appreciate it. We love getting reviews back and hearing comments. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it now. We appreciate you for tuning in, wherever it may be for fantasy football. Always got to stop at the Fantasy Coaches. So we thank you guys all for listening. Tune in until next time, everyone, and have a
back to back is not far-fetched. We got a couple of Clark Kents. I've been feeling super duper. How the heck they know the future? Come with me, don't be a loser. Grass is green like pooper scoopers. Clueless analysts don't do the half of this. In fact, I'm backing this by asking.